who are joining us. My name is Renee. I am Director of Entrepreneurship and Changemaking at EDGE. My pronouns are she and her. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's workshop on fundraising strategies and grant writing for social enterprise, which is led by Rohit Mehta, founder of DoGood Fundraising, and I will introduce him in a little bit. Before I share some background on EDGE and introduce our facilitator, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land on which we gather, or Sheridan is located, has been and still is the traditional territory of several Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Since time immemorial, numerous Indigenous nations and Indigenous peoples have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Sheridan and EDGE affirm that it's our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We're very grateful for the opportunity to work and live on this land. So I suspect when we have folks from different provinces and the US here, you may not be familiar with EDGE. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are a vibrant community of people of all backgrounds who believe entrepreneurship can make lasting change in society. We are an incubator based at Sheridan College in Oakville, Brampton, and Mississauga, Ontario. And we support changemakers as they explore entrepreneurial approaches to creating a more equitable and sustainable world. We work with all kinds of partners in the entrepreneurship ecosystem to provide founders with mentorship, learning programs, co-working space, amazing networks, and support to access funding. We also connect entrepreneurs to a lot of amazing resources that are available at Sheridan, including student talent, faculty expertise, and connections to Sheridan's 5 research centers. If you're interested in joining our community as a member, please check out our website at edge.sheridancollege.ca or connect with one of our EDGE staff through this session. So joining me today is Omar, and Neelam, I believe, is also on this call. So you could message either of them or me if you wanted more information. Just to give you a little sense of what EDGE has achieved, we launched in January of 2018. And since then, we've supported 300 founders, almost 260 ventures, and our ventures have created 650 jobs and generated 8.5 million in sales and investment. We've had 11,000 people join our sessions like this one. And among our members, 70% consider their ventures social enterprises, and also 70% are led by underrepresented founders. As I said, we support early stage impact entrepreneurs, those who are committed to increasing their ventures' triple bottom line. So that's people, planet, and profit. And we do this through mentoring, workshops, networking, funding opportunities, working with partners, and all sorts of other cool stuff. If you're interested in joining our community as a member, we have 2 cohort-based programs that are accepting applications right now. We open these applications 3 times a year. And I believe Omar will add the links to the application pages in the chat. Thank you, Omar. For early stage impact ventures that are exploring and validating new ideas, you'll want to look at our LEAP program. We also have a RISE program that offers intensive coaching and mentoring for social ventures that have demonstrated some traction. program's valued at $6,000 and is heavily subsidized by our funders, so that the cost to a founder is a small admin fee. So please consider applying. It's a really great resource. So both the LEAP and the RISE programs are open for applications right now. We also offer an Explore program for Sheridan students, which relaunches this fall if we have any Sheridan students here with us. And we're also very pleased to work with RBC Future Launch to offer the Social Impact Catalyst program, which is for youth entrepreneurs who are launching new social ventures, and applications for that program will open again in the fall. Just a few housekeeping notes. We're going to ask you to remain on mute to eliminate background noise unless Rohit tells you otherwise. If you are able, we'd love it if you could turn your camera on just to enhance the sense of community. Again, I assume Rohit will be taking questions and we'd love to see your faces. I believe we have live closed captions, Omar. I'm not seeing them, but maybe we need to get them turned on. If you have any questions, feel free to, or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you have any technical difficulties, please send a message.
Well, that may be a technical difficulty. I'm just going to jump in there. I think we lost you for a moment, Renee.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Perfect.
Where did you lose me, Rohit? And thank you.
Just at the word technical difficulties.
Okay. Yes, I had said if technical difficulties, Omar can help you, not me. So send Omar a note, letting everybody know that the session is being recorded, and not to worry if you miss anything, that we'll be posting information in the chat and in a follow-up email. So with that, I'm very pleased to welcome our facilitator this night. Tonight, Rohit Mehta is the founder and president of DoGood Fundraising. He's a graduate of the University of Toronto who's been active in the nonprofit sector for 16 years. He was appointed to a 5-year term with the grant review team of the Ontario Trillium Foundation and served a 2-year term with the Grant Review Committee for the Ministry of Children and Youth Services Youth Opportunities Fund. He has reviewed and assessed over 300 grant applications and distributed over $60 million in funding to nonprofits, charities, and grassroots organizations. He brings an additional 5 years of frontline experience working in fundraising roles with several nonprofit and charitable organizations, and has spent over a decade volunteering as a board member and leader within the sector. So Rohit, I'll hand the virtual mic over to you with thanks, and I know we're in good hands.
Thanks very much, Renee, and thank you so much to Ed Sheridan for hosting me today. I'm just going to enable screen sharing here to share my presentation with you all, and to everyone joining us from across the country. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here tonight. So I'm just seeing that the participant screen sharing might be disabled. So I'll ask if Omar, you could assist with that. And before we get started, if anyone has anything that they want to share with the group, you know, any burning questions that you're really hoping to get answered during today's session, please don't hesitate to throw that in the chat. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on the chat as we continue with the presentation here. So first and foremost, I'd like to tell you a little bit about DoGood Fundraising. It's a small business social enterprise based out of Brampton, Ontario, which offers 3 main services: all-inclusive grant writing. That's where we write grants from start to finish. Prospect research, that's where we find opportunities, grants, loans, other types of funding. And professional development training, where we do something like this. Often it's on Zoom because we're not able to gather in person, but ideally it's in person with teams, boards, staff, volunteers, artists, social enterprises, you name it, all with the goal to help you raise more money. And I should mention that we're actually not affiliated with any of the funders or institutions that we mentioned today. This information is being shared with Ed Sheridan members, Sheridan students, faculty, staff, and the general public. And I hope you enjoy the presentation. So some expectations or outcomes of today's presentation. We'll start by talking about the elements of an effective funding strategy and what that looks like for your enterprise. We'll talk about how you can apply the information that you're learning today and some common mistakes that people make when it comes to funding applications, so that you can really learn what not to do so that you know what to do when it comes to your funding applications. We'll talk about what makes a compelling story, and I'll share some examples of some entrepreneurs that I'm aware of who use certain tools and strategies to be more compelling when approaching funders and their audiences. And we'll finish up by talking about how to draft your fundraising or funding strategy and how to get started. And we'll, of course, have a chance to take any questions you might have throughout the presentation. But of course, burning questions are welcome at any time. The little chat thing will go off. And so I do encourage you to participate in that dialogue throughout. And just in terms of time, I just want to make sure I think it's a hard stop at 7:30, is that right? Okay, so let's get started talking about the elements of an effective funding strategy. When you're getting started with funding and taking that leap as an entrepreneur, you need to ask yourself, for starters, a few questions. How much funding do you need? Think about your savings. Think about your other financial resources that are available to you. Maybe you have a business that exists already and you have money in the bank, and start by identifying just what you need. Then ask yourself, what would I do with those funds? So from a strategy perspective, you might be going to a bank, applying for a loan, maybe applying for an incentive or a subsidy. You should be going into those programs with knowledge of what you're planning to do with the money and sort of why you need it and when do you need the funds. I find sometimes when I speak to entrepreneurs and I say to them, I love asking this question. Let's say I wrote you a check for $10,000 right now. What would you do? And to my surprise, many entrepreneurs don't actually know the first and second and third thing they would do with that money. And so I think when you're looking at funding, take a step back and think, okay, if I had some money fall into my lap today, what would I do with that in my business? How would this allow my business to grow? How would we be able to take that next step? And then once you've figured this out and started to identify your needs in priority order, you need to think about how you're going to pay back the money if you're borrowing it. And I just want to mention, Omar, it says 2 people entered the waiting room. I'm not sure if you're able to help with that, but that would be wonderful. Thank you. So when it comes to the strategy around funding, take time to ask yourself these questions. Before I started my business, I took a trip abroad and I just spent that month thinking. I knew people had been saying to me for a few years, Rohit, you know a lot about grants, you should start a business. And at that time, I was really deciding, should I do it or not? And so I took time to reflect on these questions and many more, and started writing out that business plan. And I find that's the most important step. Take the 1 month, 2 months, even 3 months to do that. And of course, you have support at Ed Sheridan, where they will guide you and hold your hand and make sure that your numbers and your concepts and strategies make sense before you enter this journey of funding. So you've answered these questions in your head, you've started thinking about it, now get it on paper, okay? These are some of the basics that I think are extremely important. Anybody should be able to understand from your summary what it is that your business does. It should be nice and clear, compelling. They should be able to get it right away, right? And they say, what's in a name? Well, the name should be self-explanatory, but then you should be able to come up with a summary that you can use on different funding applications, and anytime you're trying to obtain any sort of financing. Problem statement, a lot of us are running social enterprises. We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to make the world a better place. What problem are you solving? Make sure that's really clearly defined. That's going to make you stand out among funders and people who are contributing to your business. What are some of your goals, objectives, targets, right? So in our business, as a grant writing business, the goal was really to support small and up and coming nonprofits, charities, social enterprises, and artists. You know, we didn't set out a number. We didn't say we're going to raise this much money by this date, but we could have done that and could have been more specific about it. And so I think you need to be able to set targets so that you know what you're working towards. A lot of us set financial targets. We do our cash flow projections. We write down how much money we're going to make. But those of us who are running social enterprises, some of our targets should also be social in nature. And I think that those who are funding us will appreciate that quite a bit. So numbers are important. You can't get away from that. If you run a business, you have to know your numbers. Anybody who watches Dragon's Den will see that the number one place where the Dragons fail when it comes to obtaining that funding during that pitch competition, a lot of them, they don't know their numbers, right? So folks will come in the den and the Dragons will ask them questions, what are your margins? How much money have you raised? How much do you have invested? And consistently, I see that those who don't know their numbers, their forecasts, what really will allow them to succeed, they end up not getting past that point. Whereas the entrepreneurs who get their numbers bang on, they're accurate, they have the answers to the questions, they often get funded at that stage. Now, in this sort of document or plan that you're putting together, you need to have something that makes you different, unique, competitive. And so think about what it is about your business. Is it a food delivery business that's employing, BIPOC delivery persons? Is it a business that is making sure that animals are treated well and taken care of? What is it that's unique? And for social enterprises, what is it that's the social aspect of it? Put that front and center in this document or in this plan, because again, it's going to make you stand out. Always include contact information and you'll have some attachments there to your strategy. So let's talk about applying for funds and applying all these concepts to your specific enterprise. There are so many different types of funding programs that are available, and I've put together a very small list of some grants, loans, subsidies, incentives that you can apply to. And so if you have specific questions about these, one of the best things to do is to actually Google them. That's what I do sometimes when I'm putting together information for people, because things are constantly changing. And even from last year to this year, some of these programs will change. Some of them have grown. The COVID programs specifically have grown. And then some of these programs disappear and then they pop up later with one government and with one, party in power, that sort of thing. And so you constantly should be on the lookout for grants and all of the other types of funding opportunities mentioned. And of course, your team at Ed Sheridan is often well aware of what's out there, and you should be in touch with your mentors and those who are supporting you so that they can continue to tell you about these programs. So when you're applying for grants, there are a few different types. There's sort of core or operational grants, very popular during COVID, where many people's operations were challenged. There's seed grants or pilot grants, project or program grants, capacity building, capital or equipment, and then a category that I really love, which is sort of in-kind/free. So when it comes to core, they will fund day-to-day things. I was actually in a pitch competition this morning, and some of the entrepreneurs were asking for funding for some of these items. Maybe you need a computer. Maybe you need a massage table for your massage business. Maybe you need, candle holders for your candle company, right? This is usually funding that doesn't really belong to any specific area, and it's meant for your ongoing needs. Oftentimes, governments will fund this if they're providing core funding for your enterprise, and we've seen this in a lot of COVID support that's been available for entrepreneurs. Seed or pilot funding is a wonderful thing because it allows you to take that idea or that concept and to grow with it. This is becoming more and more popular in social enterprise funding. And so the investment readiness program is one that you might have heard of. It hasn't been announced for sure for this fall, so I didn't put it in here because we don't know if it's going to happen again. But these types of programs will allow you to spark an idea and to grow it, to turn it into something. Maybe you can research your idea or your concept. Sometimes foundations will fund this, but generally for-profit social enterprises, we're looking at government funding. I anticipate about 2 or 3 years down the road, you're going to see foundations providing funding to social entrepreneurs like us. There's still some policy work that has to happen in Canada. Some laws have to change in order to make social enterprise a little bit more of a prominent business structure before your community foundation or even United Way would actually consider funding a for-profit. Program or project funding. So generally, nonprofits and charities are the ones who would apply to this sort of fund. But I want to tell you something that most people don't realize. Nonprofits and charities which apply for funding can also hire your company. They can also pay for your goods or your services. So understand that when funding opportunities come up and someone's program is being funded or somebody's running a community engagement project, maybe they're working with young people after school to have them engage in activities. Your sports and recreation business can be funded through that grant. Let's say there's seniors who are socially isolated and they need to learn how to connect with one another using technology. Your business that maybe specializes in teaching seniors about technology or training them on how to use tablets, that can actually be funded through a grant. So corporations, foundations, and governments all provide program and project funding. And I want to encourage you to reach out to organizations that you know and try and partner with them. It's a great way that your enterprise can actually receive funding and core funding for your operations by pitching it as a project together with another nonprofit, charity, that sort of thing. Capacity building funding is a unique area of funding that really has to do with training and development. And so you can actually improve how you deliver your services. Maybe you specialize in a particular type of rehabilitation therapy service, and you need to go and get trained on how to do a certain technique. The fact that you're paying $700-800 to go get trained so that you can help people who are maybe, they're maybe recovering from accidents or that sort of thing, that training money can come from a funder, and it's called capacity building funding. This can be used to help navigate all sorts of change within the community. Many times you can take your knowledge and then go out there and help others. And so right now, many foundations tend to fund this. But as I mentioned just a moment ago, you can form a collaboration with nonprofits and charities and get access to some of this funding. Capital or equipment funding is really about equipment, installing things, renovating, making repairs, structures, anything physical, things that you can actually hold in your hand. And sometimes capital funding means taking advantage of technology. It has been a trend during COVID. Now, there's all sorts of levels of grants, and some of them, are in the millions of dollars. Let's say you're setting up machinery, or you're preparing for export, or you're hiring foreign workers. You really need to look at the scale of your business and then seek out help based on that. If you're buying a lot of equipment or doing quite a bit of repairs or manufacturing work, there are significant funds that are available, but I don't think that's part of scope for most of the entrepreneurs who are listening today. And so I'll just say, speak to your mentor or advisor at Ed Sheridan if you need that sort of assistance. And they can certainly make referrals to folks like us to help you get access to those bigger pieces of funding. Tons of money available if you're doing large scale manufacturing, equipment, installations, renovations, that sort of thing. And so this is the one that I mentioned was free. In-kind really means donations of items of value, not so much money. And so when folks see that you're a social entrepreneur, maybe you're struggling, maybe your business, you know, your food truck, for instance, closed because you couldn't attend events, or your wedding, you know, photography or wedding cake service wasn't able to operate. People will want to help you, and they will go out of their way to support you. And so you can often receive donations of all sorts of things. We know a lot of businesses have closed, unfortunately, over the past year, and so some people might actually be getting rid of, you know, fridges, supplies. Earlier this year, I saw somebody was actually tearing apart a home, and they invited folks to just come and take different supplies, come and take part of our kitchen, come and take our doors. And so you need to think about this as a business owner, because you might not have all the money in the world. And if somebody can provide you with donations of goods or services, repairs, renos, a little bit of printing, maybe a banner for you. Somebody was kind enough to help us with our website in the early days without charging us for it. You know, that can be huge. And then you can pay back those people. The example of the website, you know, the company that did that work, we must have referred them at least 20 times, right? So they eventually ended up benefiting from the in-kind donation of their services. And so Jessica asks, how to initiate this collaboration with non-for-profits and charities? The easiest thing, Jessica, is to just reach out to them and say, hey, you know, my business is all about teaching seniors how to use tablets, and I noticed that you work with seniors. Could we talk? And in that conversation, you don't want to say right away, hey, you know, hire us to provide services to your seniors, but you want to take time to understand that particular organization. Why do they work with seniors? How long have they been doing that work? Why is that important to them? And then you can gently mention that you actually run a company that provides training, and if they need your help, you know, you can make yourself available for a low fee. And grant writers like myself are experts in figuring out how to take resources like that training business and leverage it so that the nonprofit can train their seniors without having to do a lot of work, right? Nonprofit and charity folks are often totally overwhelmed, and if we can take a little bit of work off their plate, that's a great effort, I think. And so as business people, you know, don't forget to offer your services and goods to organizations to try and obtain some additional funding. So we've talked about a lot of different sort of types of grants. And now let's talk about loans. So there are a number of loans that are available to entrepreneurs like us. And I found some of these ones to be quite helpful. I've actually explored all of these personally. And I have a lot of good things to say about the second one there, Alterna Savings Microfinance Loan. Let's go through them in detail here. So, you know, Canada has its top 5 banks, right? And all of us probably have an account with one of them. But I have to say, sometimes it can be an intense process. Let me just say that. Not only do you need to have a few meetings with them, you need to go through the hoops, fill out the paperwork. They will require documentation, right? So they'll require a business plan, your incorporation documents, and your business number. They'll definitely do a credit check. They'll definitely check your credit history, and they'll probably revise the rate based on how good or bad your credit is. If you have great credit, you get a great rate, right? Cash flow projections are a must. So obviously it's a bank. They're very, very interested in the numbers. They'll ask for your financial statements, you know, however long you've had them for. Even if it's just a year, it's still something. And those can be prepared internally. You don't have to go to an accountant or an auditor to do that. You can do that sort of yourself. But as I mentioned, the interest rates can be a challenge. And, you know, one particular bank, I'm thinking back to, I think the year was 2019. And I think based on your credit, the interest rate varied between 3 or 4% and 7%, right? So that's a big difference. And so there are various reasons why entrepreneurs, especially those of us who are sort of starting out, might struggle with loans from the bank. That is why the Alterna Savings Microfinance Loan Program is here. So this is an excellent program. I've definitely taken advantage of it myself. Susan Henry is responsible for this program at Alterna, And of course, it's a credit union, so it's a little bit more community oriented. They know you by your first name, you know. And what's great is that they're actually offering up to $25,000 for entrepreneurs, and it's not that hard to actually get a microfinance loan. So they're trying to really support entrepreneurs who have faced barriers from financing. Maybe they've not been able to get a loan. Maybe they've faced various issues, bad credit, or lack of business knowledge, not able to produce a business plan, that sort of thing. They will truly help you. And they actually have a program that once you get a loan, you join the program and you go to workshops and that sort of thing. It's awesome. So some of their segments that they fund include social enterprises, newcomers, new Canadians, professional development. So I gave the example of you're going to do a course so that you can do more in your business and improve your business. Low income earners. Some people might be earning minimum wage. You might think, I'm not going to qualify for a loan. Maybe they would give you that loan. And women entrepreneurs. Now, a lot of us have heard of the CERB and CEBA and this and that. I have to say the CEBA is a loan program that truly surprised me. I wonder if anybody on the chat here has actually applied for CEBA and received it successfully. Could you just put in a word if you did? So I applied for it. It took a few hours of work. Certainly there's some troubleshooting that's involved because you have to hit certain thresholds and you have to fall into certain categories and that sort of thing. But what's amazing is small businesses and nonprofits with at least $40,000 in eligible expenses last year, and this has actually changed now, it's up to 60,000, can receive financing of up to 60. And actually that number, now that I mention it, the 40,000 in eligible expenses, that's actually sort of disappeared. This system changed about 5 or 6 times. Even I had a hard time keeping track of it. And so just check the CEBA website when you're applying to make sure that the thresholds haven't changed again. But what's amazing about this is you can apply for up to $60,000 in loans at 0% interest. I will say that again. You can apply for up to $60,000 in loans at 0% interest. They are literally giving you the money. So I will admit that I took advantage of this for my business. I certainly think everybody here should if you're eligible. And you just have to pay it back by next year. So, if you do the math on that, up to a quarter of your loan can be forgiven. And so there's quite some flexibility with this program, but it's amazing. It's an amazing program, and they offer support. You can give them a call. They'll help you out over the phone. And it's through your bank, right? So wherever you bank as a small business, as a social enterprise, you just speak to them and you say, I'm interested in applying to CEBA, and they'll get you started. This is probably one of the best ones that I'm going to talk about because it's extremely rare. Which banks give out loans at 0% interest? And not just that, but if you pay it off, up to a quarter will be forgiven. So the 40K that my business took advantage of, we will pay it back next year and we'll receive a $10,000 grant. That's unheard of, right? And you can leverage, so you can take a loan, put that loan aside, and then have it there for either, a rainy day, or you could take advantage of it to maybe expand, grow the business, that sort of thing. Rise Asset Development is another one to keep an eye on. They give loans of up to $10,000 to launch or grow your business. And they're low interest loans. They'll look at your business plan and your concept and that sort of thing. And of course, they want you to repay the loan. So they're going to look at some of those factors. No funder or institution is just going to give you money without checking your capacity to repay. So just keep that in mind. What's most important or most interesting about this one is they actually focus on individuals who've experienced mental health or addiction challenges, right? So if anybody here identifies with that, it can be so hard to maybe come out of a difficult situation and then try and start a business, grow a business. They recognize that. They're actually specifically helping people to rise through their programs. And in addition, those who are unable to access traditional financing for whatever reason, you've been discriminated, you have bad credit, no credit, that sort of thing, definitely get in touch with Rise Asset Development. So BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, I did visit them early on in my entrepreneurial journey, and I maybe went a little bit too early. You should have a business that's actually been in operation for at least 24 months, and you should be generating revenue. And they give loans, small business loans that are completely online right now, and it indicates that they're actually pretty easy to access. And so if your business has been in operation, you're generating revenue, it's a plus if you have assets such as a home. Definitely a good one to go to. And they offer more than just financing. They actually offer advice and coaching and that sort of thing. But of course, it is a bank. And so, sometimes they have sort of programs that you would pay to be involved in as well. And so I'm not too familiar with the paid mentorship or paid support, but I can tell you that they'll offer loans probably with competitive rates to what your bank would offer. And I believe it is focused on entrepreneurs as well. And so there's that understanding that you're in a business, you're in the early stages, that sort of thing. Let's talk about subsidies. And there's 3 subsidies that I love, and I have personally taken advantage of all of them in my own business. And so I can tell you they're all super. Canada Summer Jobs is the best one. We've actually just hired 2 Canada Summer Jobs students this year, and having students on the team who are essentially being highly subsidized by the government is wonderful, because it's adding to your team, right? You can get them to help you with all sorts of things, that are within the parameters that you commit to when you apply. And right now, for-profit enterprises can get a wage subsidy of up to 65% of minimum wage. This is flexible, right? So there's certain things that you can do in your application to sort of modify the amount of subsidy you're getting. I believe there are formulas that indicate that the more you're paying, the higher the subsidy. But my understanding is that it's up to about 65% of minimum wage for now. And this changes, right? Previously it was 50. They've also done all sorts of things during COVID to actually extend the dates. So normally the summer months were May, June, July, and August. And now they've actually extended the end date for employers to the end of February within certain circumstances. You really have to get in touch with them to talk to them about it. And it would be for your particular business and your particular situation. Nonprofits are certainly able to extend that date, but for-profit social enterprises, you would have to get in touch with them. And so if you have questions, please do reach out, because these programs are always changing, and it can be quite difficult year over year to try and determine what are the changes without actually reaching out to them. And the other one that's awesome is that you can hire on a part-time basis, because previously in the early days, it used to actually be full-time, and our business has actually hired staff on a part-time basis. We were even able to maybe rearrange the schedule that we'd originally intended when we thought COVID was ending, when we applied. And the reality that COVID continued throughout the summer, we were able to revise the hours a little bit. We're paying 35% of their wages. So think about that for your business. It opens in December and it closes right at the beginning of January. Timing is horrible. So if you're going to make a note on your calendar, in December, you should apply for Canada Summer Jobs. Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. So this subsidy covers 75% of wages between specific dates. I actually took out the dates because it was so confusing to try and follow, this month to this month, that date to that date. If you think you might be eligible, certainly check out the website for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And they'll provide you, as it says there, 75% for the first $58,000 per employee. And so they have a restriction there per week. And those restrictions are constantly changing. In fact, sometimes the COVID restrictions that were initially announced have actually been lifted completely. And you had to experience a decrease in revenue year over year. So I believe when I first heard about this, you had to experience a decrease of at least 15% and 30% between 2020 and 2021. So have a look again at what they're offering there, because the program constantly changes. And a lot of times you can actually access this program directly through your payroll system or your accounting system. We use Wave at our business, and we found it was very easy to access and apply for it. This is an awesome program. The Career Ready program is not often talked about. I'm not sure how people find out about it. I found out through someone, and they just provide subsidies for any businesses or organizations that are hiring a student. So you can hire them for a term. I believe our student was 380 hours. And so you need to pay them consistently, and you actually have to provide a meaningful work experience, so not licking envelopes. And I don't recall what the subsidy was, but I know it increased to 75%. And so that's quite a bit of money, up to $7,500 for a term. And this allowed us to leapfrog a little bit. We were a much smaller, like one-person shop essentially. And so by taking advantage of this program, we were able to bring on a student through Sheridan, and then that student's wage was mostly covered. We paid for some of it, and today that person works full-time in our business thanks to this program. So when it comes to obtaining funding, I mean, these programs need to be talked about. You can really leapfrog and grow the business, and somebody else can help pay for it. Speaking of people paying for things for your business, incentives are out there. There's lots of them. And some of the educational institutions that I've mentioned here are definitely going to be perfect for the Career Ready program. The Career Ready program really doesn't have a ton of requirements, except for the students being active students, them having a full-time course load. They have to be using some sort of cloud software, which is almost all software now, and certainly get in touch about different programs. But I'm just going to run through some incentives really quickly and how you can actually bring on students in your business. So Employment Ontario is one that I've actually worked with before for an Employment Ontario funded agency. The government of Ontario is giving away the grants when it comes to employers seeking either new employees or bringing on people into employment in sort of short terms. And so two grants I want to talk about. One is Canada Ontario Job Grant, COJG is how it's known generally. And you can get up to $10,000 to train employees. I mean, it's that simple. You have to go through the paperwork, of course. The employee training has to be a designated trainer. It has to be official, but it's quite a bit of money per employee, and there's literally no limit on that one. You can train 100 employees if you want. The other one is Youth Job Connection, YJC, and that one allows you to hire young people for a term. I believe it's 6 months is considered a success, and they offer quite a bit of incentives. If you train those youth for 4 weeks, your organization or business will actually receive quite a bit of money as a bit of a subsidy or an incentive, and based on how long you employ them, you'll also receive money. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it is a certain number of weeks of employment. They can give you a subsidy of up to $1,000 for that duration. And so these programs are funded by the government, which means they're subject to change at all times. And so you should reach out to your local employment center and see if you can get a young person employed with your business or your social enterprise or your company. Now, when it comes to placements, I put these under incentives because you are getting help, actual workers who are going to contribute to your business, grow it, and you're actually offering them an incentive. You're training them. You're giving them real life work experience. And so, with Humber, students are coming from so many fields, 420-hour placements. I thought this would be something that everybody on this webinar would like, because students really need the placements, and your business could probably take advantage of this. Now, they don't always require payment for all of these placements, and so you should check with each institution. But I personally recommend providing some sort of compensation to students, not just to cover their expenses, transportation, the use of their own equipment if they're at home using computers and that sort of thing, but also because you're getting so much value in your business that you should try and compensate if possible. And we can help you apply for grants to cover those costs. Trials College is another one. They have an accounting and payroll program. All the entrepreneurs I talk to, the biggest headache that people mention to me is accounting and payroll, right? Because getting paid takes quite a bit of work. In my business, we were able to bring someone on and get help with that specific piece. And it went from us struggling to get paid on time to us always getting paid on time. And so this is one I recommend. Marketing is one where many people struggle if you're not sort of marketing savvy. It can be tough. So there you can get a 300-hour placement over 12 weeks. It's about 3 months. You know, certainly something that everyone here should consider. Business administration is great as well. And you'll see that the programs are about 25 hours per week, which still gives you time to breathe. Personally, I can find that if you have too many students or too many placements, you'll literally be managing those students and placements all day. So don't overdo it. Maybe take on 1, maybe 2 at a time. I find 2 is great. And then as you grow your business and as you bring on more team members, you can expand and take on more placement students. Now, Guelph Humber has one as well, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. You have it here. And of course, Sheridan College has a number of placement opportunities. You know, the business program is quite prominent. They have a great finance program. That's where we got our student. And they come from multiple degree and diploma programs, highly educated, ready to work. And so I really do encourage you to think about all of the different opportunities that I mentioned so far. Now, let's keep going here to checking the time. We got about 40 minutes. So how do you create a strong funding application? What I like to do as a past funder, I was with the Ontario Trillium Foundation, just considered the largest nonprofit funding body in Canada. I observed a lot of issues and a lot of challenges. And so I have this top 10 that I want to share. And these are really 10 mistakes that apply to everyone. And these are things you want to avoid. And so if you do, you'll have a really strong funding application. So top 10, number 10, not having statistics or research. Especially as social enterprises, it's so important that you have good stats to support the work you're doing. If you've identified that you're working in a neighborhood with food insecurity, and that's why you're opening up a small local grocery store or a container that's going to be a grocery sort of facility, you need to actually prove that this is a real issue. You need to have statistics. You need to justify why you're doing this amazing work so that the funders know it and that they can provide funding to you to maybe address that issue or that challenge. So StatsCan is great. Any online surveys that you can find is great. You know, you have to really speak locally. So if you're working in Oakville or Brampton, try and provide statistics for those particular areas as opposed to broad, sort of nationwide or global statistics, right? Top 10 mistakes, number 9, submitting late applications. So when funding opportunities show up, and especially the government funded ones, they're often very short notice. You might find out about them a few days beforehand, or maybe you have a week to apply. It's so important that you avoid submitting at the last minute. So a strong application doesn't mean anything if it's never submitted, right? If you end up sort of waiting until 11:59, and I know it's happened to all of us, you may run into crashes, and certainly now with COVID and so many people struggling to obtain financing for their business, when you see a great grant, you're competing with hundreds, if not thousands of people for that grant. And so if you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline, and that's horrible. But the best way to avoid this, of course, is to submit as early as possible and save a copy of your grant. Nothing more embarrassing than winning a grant and then having to contact the funder to ask for your own application. Number 8, not utilizing attachments. I mean, this is a really important piece here. If you're applying for anything, a loan, a grant, subsidy, and they give you the opportunity to add attachments, you should definitely add maybe a newspaper article about your business, maybe a letter from a client or a customer. Maybe it's a photo, that somebody took at one of your maybe events or something that you've done as a business. Maybe you've supported your community in some way, and there's a picture of you holding a check or a plaque or something. This is especially important with social enterprises because we're trying to do good work. And so it's hard to get that from text, right? And a lot of us who are doing review and assessment, we want to see the pictures, we want to see the people, right? So utilize attachments. Top 10 mistakes, number 7, is underselling your work. So it's so important that you show and maybe brag about even any past successes that you've had in anything you've done, whether it's a past business, maybe you worked somewhere else. If you have experience that you're bringing to this work, you should talk about it. You should include statistics so that the reader knows who you are and what you stand for, right? Because they don't know anything until they start reading your work. And at that point, they're looking for those accomplishments, the accolades. Did you win an award? Have you become certified in what you do? Maybe you have, as a business, served 500 customers in your first 2 months. Whatever those stats are, don't worry about people judging you for them. Even if it's you've only served 10 people, that might be a great statistic for you. Always include that in there and avoid underselling your own work. Top 10 mistakes, number 6, not expressing urgency. So with the emergency funding, I've seen so many COVID emergency grants. You have to make it an emergency. You really have to find persuasive ways. This grant is essential to my business because this funding will enable me to immediately, without this grant, I wouldn't be able to, So that helps funders to prioritize your work. And at the end of the day, it's people like us who are sitting on the other side, with the checkbooks in hand. So think about how you can create urgency in your work to make your applications more persuasive. Top 10 mistake number 5, starting from scratch. Don't do it. Make sure you get some of these documents together and keep them in a folder somewhere, ideally online, because hard drives crash and laptops fall on the ground. And so, a Dropbox, a Google Drive, these are great places to keep this stuff. And your cash flow projection should be there. It should be in one place, and you should just constantly update it as opposed to creating new ones every time. A budget is so important. The pitches that you've done, I remember they did a TELUS pitch competition, and I spent like 2 hours coming up with my perfect pitch. Next time I needed to apply for something, I just copied and pasted that in there. Why would I rewrite that from scratch, right? So never start from scratch. And you also want to build on any declines, because applying for grants and loans can be a lot of work. And if it's unfortunate, that you get declined, don't worry. You can actually take that and incorporate it into your next submission. Everything is useful when it comes to self-development in your business. And so if you can take all the hard work you've done and then build on it, you're probably going to be successful the second or third time around. And we've talked about cash flow projections. I just recommend projecting multiple years out. And as your business grows in time, just go and check in on those projections, revise them, that sort of thing. Top 10 mistakes, number 4, not committing to long-term projects. So even as a business, especially as a social enterprise that's trying to make a difference, you should be truly committed to the big difference, the long-term difference that you're going to make over time. And you have a mission. We all have a mission. So you need to stick to that mission and make it really clear what you're trying to do. Otherwise, the reader will look at it and say, well, this isn't really well written, or I don't really understand, right? And a lot of times when we're seeking investment or when we're seeking financing or funding, we're trying to get them to believe in us and our idea. So it's so important that when you commit to a long-term vision, that you communicate it. And at the same time, I'll just say that the governments tend to focus short-term. So a lot of the grants right now are COVID funding grants. We know there's been challenges, get some money instantly to get you back up on your feet, right? They're not looking for you to solve hunger in your community. But I can tell you that as the shift happens towards social enterprise, they will be looking for you to solve hunger in your community, or solve mental health challenges, or solve issues related to young people and seniors and adults and that sort of thing. So try and have that mission be really clear and put it out there, not just in these documents, but put it out there, on your socials, on your website, that sort of thing. Here's one that's a funny one: spelling and grammar mistakes. Yes, it happens to all of us all the time, but come on, we have Google Docs, we have Microsoft Word, Grammarly, right? We really shouldn't be making spelling mistakes. And I find that the online portals are the culprits sometimes, because they have these little boxes, and you're there two days before the deadline on your phone. You're not seeing what you're typing, and you might have some mistakes made right there. I recommend using a Google Doc or Microsoft Word document to actually copy and paste all the content from the doc into the official portal. You can see your answer in front of you. It doesn't have to be on a tiny little cell phone screen or a little box. And you can see when there's mistakes, because it will literally put a little red squiggly line underneath and show you that's a mistake. Google is exceptional in that they will actually correct your writing as you type. This is some new thing that they've started, and it's quite revolutionary. And so think about how you can avoid mistakes, so your applications are more clear and easy to understand, and hopefully more likely to be successful. Top 10 mistakes number 2, too much jargon. You have to write so that people like us at the other end get it. If you're doing some sort of salon business and you're providing microdermal abrasion, like, I might not know what that is. I don't even know how to pronounce that. So it's important that if there's certain words that are used in your business or in your social enterprise circle, you should probably explain those words. And you should actually try and write in a way that funders are not going to need to look up that acronym, or they're not going to need to go to do a Google search, like define that word. I don't know what it means, right? And I've had to do this sometimes. I remember reading a grant application once, and they kept using the same 2 or 3 different acronyms. Each of them had about 5 letters, and I'm reading, a few paragraphs down, and I was like, I don't understand what this says. So then I have to start again, look up where they define the acronym, then go back down again. Now I don't remember what they were writing about, and I don't think I scored that application very well. And so use the funder's language. If the grant is all about fresh food and funding enterprises that are bringing fresh food to communities, always put the word fresh in there. It's their language, so when you use it, they're going to love it. But if you keep referring to it as nutritious and nutritionally balanced food, maybe that's a piece of jargon in your subsector that they might not understand, right? I find it helps to actually have a family member read it, or like a close friend, because they'll give you the honest truth. And if they don't get it, they'll say to you, sorry, I don't get it, right? And everybody needs to understand your applications and the language you've used. Top 10 mistakes number 1, not answering the question. This is incredibly frustrating for funders. You'll read an answer and you'll keep reading the answer again, and you'll be looking for it, but it's not there. Really, the answer should actually be in the first sentence, right? So why did you start this business? I started this business to bring more healthy food to our community, right? To help kids eat healthier. Okay, question, answer, awesome. But if you didn't answer the question, you might not get the marks or the score, and you might not get the grant, right? So these are some common mistakes that I've seen, and I think if you consider some of these, your applications will be much stronger. Let me take a moment for any questions or anything that's come up. So we have about half an hour more. So if there are things that you're wondering about, you don't have to wait. Feel free to throw them in the chat and we can cover them. Can you apply?
Can you hear me, Rohit?
Sorry?
Oh, I was just going to direct you to a couple of questions that came up in the chat.
So can you apply if you have a business in Canada? Can you only apply if you have a business in Canada? The CEBA loan and Canadian wage subsidy and that sort of thing, they're only for Canadian businesses. You really have to have it registered in Canada. It has to have a business number, that sort of thing. Is CEBA eligible for new organizations just established in 2021? I don't believe so, unless they've changed it. It wasn't like that in year 2020 when I went through it with a fine-tooth comb and read the guidelines very carefully. Unless they've changed it, I don't believe so. I don't believe a business that's that new would be able to get this Canadian Emergency Business Account. I think you have to have, the business has to have been running for at least a year, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for those questions. Ooh, people asked the exact same question. Does CEBA loan deadline? I don't actually think that deadline was firm. As far as I recall, the CEBA loan deadline kept rolling. I will admit that I haven't actually looked up the date. We've just been so busy focusing on grants since June 30th. But I do encourage you to go just do a Google. So make sure the language is positive, it's uplifting, it's inspiring, and that's probably going to bring more funding and more revenue your way, not just from funders, but actually from customers as well. And let the numbers tell the story. So, if you as a business have sold, 100,000 water bottles, for instance, that can be really amazing. And what you should do is you should allow that story to really communicate itself through your work. So here's one that I saw that I really liked. This is Marissa, and she's somebody who is actually quite educated around being an esthetician, I can't say that word, makeup artist, that sort of thing. And so what's great about this is when you look at her brand and her materials, it really is about her story. She talks about how she's gone through all these efforts to really be certified as an artist and to gain a lot of experience, and then she started her business. I thought that was excellent. Somebody's asking about the video here, and I'm sure we can make that recording available somehow. I'll leave that up to our facilitators, Renee and Omar, to maybe share at the end there. So thank you for that. Another one that I wanted to share is about overcoming challenges. So if you're from Brampton or you know about Brampton, you might have heard of Tea by Daniel, right? That's Daniel pictured there in the cartoon on the right with the bow tie. He overcame a lot of personal challenges. And one of the things that he liked to highlight in his personal story was that he served tea to the Duke of, I want to say the Duke of Edinburgh. He's part of the royal family essentially, and he came to Canada, and Daniel went through extraordinary efforts to get some tea to this gentleman, and it's kind of a big deal because it's tea and they're the royal family. There's a really strong connection, and so not only has he overcome tons of challenges as an entrepreneur, but he was really great about talking about that pinnacle on social media in his different marketing materials. And here, right outside there, I believe this is in the mall, they had a tea location right outside on a big billboard. It says, "Tea that is royally approved." In other words, it's telling a story about how this member of the royal family literally said, "Yeah, this is the best tea I've ever had. It's amazing." And that's kind of a big deal, not just to him, but generally to customers. Wow, the royal family approves, right? And so when you've overcome challenges, you should try and communicate that. Now, when it comes to the numbers, this is our company. I'm going to brag a little bit and say we've won over $2 million in grants, right? The average grant being about 20,000. So there's over 100 of them that we've actually won. And we put that right there on the front page of our website. It's very prominent and it's very clear. And so you should also brag about accomplishments and let the numbers tell the story for your customers. Let's say, Disney is probably one of the best examples. They had like a running number at their parks. In the 1960s, we just had our millionth visitor here, right? And today, who knows how many billions they've had. But having a running number really tells people about your business and what you've been able to accomplish. Now, let's talk about drafting your funding strategy and your project story. And so when it comes to drafting this amazing work that you've been able to do so far, you have your business plan, right? And it has the numbers and it has sort of the nuts and bolts. And then there's images, quotes, and messages which describe you. So I showed you some examples of some images that you can maybe emulate, right? Whether it's a picture of your face and sort of a bio, or whether it's some pinnacle moment or event that really describes you. Think about how you can incorporate that into your story or your strategy to then put out there to different funders and contributors. Testimonials are amazing. So if people have had a really great experience with your business, get that in writing. I've literally said to people when they say something very nice about the business, can I quote you on that? They say yes, grab that information because it's going to go in your story or your strategy. And when you've made a difference, especially as a social enterprise, you produce these wonderful smoothies that helped bring people back to health after they struggled with maybe eating disorder or healthy eating issue. Talk about that story. Even go so far as to ask one of your customers if they'd be willing to be featured, as a result of the impact that you had on them. And if they allow you to, you can always take that story or that information, maybe change the name of the person, but show that your enterprise actually works. You're actually making a difference. And again, I suggest when you have these stories and strategies that you run it by somebody who can give you a bit of an objective piece of feedback. So I find family can sometimes be great because they'll look at something and they'll say, okay, yeah, I know your business. This truly represents you. This is great. Or they'll say, well, maybe you should try something different, right? But don't just keep it within sort of your own framework. Share it with people. Show it to a mentor. Take it to Ed Sheridan. Show it to somebody there. And this can be a really great way to elevate your story to bring in more revenue and funding for your business. So I just have one or two questions that I came up with here. I can just picture, a lot of you are probably thinking, okay, this is great, but what do I do, right? How do I even get started? I don't even know where to start. Well, when it comes to seeking funds, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation to create a budget. I think that's super important. What would you do if I gave you $10,000 right now, right? Have that priority list there and add a few sentences really indicating what you would do, when you would do it, how much you would spend there. Now you have a little bit of a plan, but you should also get support and mentorship. In my business, every step of the way, whenever we made a major decision, I reached out to my mentors. Hey, we're planning on hiring someone. Hey, we want to expand geographically. We want to introduce a new service. And they would provide mentorship. And sometimes they would actually suggest that we shouldn't do something. Or sometimes they would suggest that maybe we should do it differently. That can be a really great way to get started. And now that you have that guidance, now you can go and apply for the loan or the subsidy or the incentive. Another question that you might be wondering, I don't know where to go for funding, right? So today we've shared a number of opportunities that you can jump on, whether it's subsidies or loans, grants. And I think an accountant is actually a really great person to obtain even more insights. I didn't talk a lot about tax incentives. I'm not an expert in that, but accountants are. And I think having a good accountant who can help you with that can really benefit the bottom line in your business, because they'll tell you things that you wouldn't necessarily know on your own about how to save money and how to maybe be more economical with your financial picture. But I think reaching out to fundraising professionals like us through Edge Sheridan can be really great. So I do encourage you to actually connect with Ed Sheridan first before you reach out to us, so that they know that this presentation worked and that you actually took value out of it. And hopefully they can refer you to companies like us and other fundraising experts as well, who can maybe hold your hand and guide you through this. They also have a lot of expertise in-house. So the staff at Edge certainly know about some of the opportunities I've mentioned here and can probably help you apply as well. Okay, so I want to thank you all for your time and attention today. I think we've got a few more minutes for questions. My name is Rohit Mehta. I'm with DoGood Fundraising, and we provide all-inclusive grant writing, prospect research, and professional development training for your social enterprise business. And we'll take any questions at this time.
Just give it a minute to see if we have any questions. Seeing some appreciation for you, Rohit. So maybe while we wait and see if anybody will pop any questions in the chat, I just wanted to note that Rohit is returning for a part 2 of this session. Same time, same place, next week, diving into Grant Writing 101. So building your knowledge and skills in how to write grant applications. And Omar has just kindly posted the link to register in the chat if you have not yet. And I think it's probably safe to say we don't have any questions arising with it. Do you have any parting words before I maybe wrap things up?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us here. I think it's so important to continue to take time to learn about funding opportunities and to continue to grow your business by networking and speaking to people. So remember to connect back to Ed Sheridan and continue to ask them how they can support your business, and take advantage of all these programs that are out there. We've certainly been able to grow our business with the help of entrepreneur centers like Edge, and I hope you do too. And I want to thank everyone again for your time tonight.
And I will just add to that thanks. A big thank you to you, Rohit, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. And thanks to everyone who joined us this evening from wherever you are in the world. If you like what you heard and you'd like to stay connected to Edge, you'll get all the details in a follow-up email from us. If you want to stay connected to an ecosystem of entrepreneurs who are fighting for equity, inclusion, and justice, we'd welcome you to sign up in the follow-up email for our impact cluster work. If you have an awesome idea that's flourishing in your mind or an active venture that's achieving social change, please apply to our programs and share them with others who you think might find them interesting. We would love to hear from you. And to make it easy, maybe Omar, you could pop our social channels slide up, or maybe pop them in the chat. We're not too hard to find on social media. There we go. Next slide though, Omar. So feel free to follow us, feel free to shout us out on social and spread the word. And Omar is posting a little feedback form in the chat. So if you have feedback on this evening, we would very much appreciate it. And think that's it. Thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I hope we see all of you back here next week, same time, same place. Thank you again.